You skipped it, you dissed it, you said it's a bore. But what if that film's got a little bit more? What if I don't like it? What if it's bad? What if it's awkward or lazy or sad? But what if it's genius, a total surprise? What if it's gold when I open my eyes? We're watching the films you love to avoid. Now sit down and deal with your cinephile void. What if I don't like it? Let's give it a spin. You might hate it or love it. Let's dive right in.
What if you've never seen No Country for Old Men? It's a modern classic and is widely considered one of the top films of the 21st century. It won Best Picture, it won Best Director, it won Best Supporting Actor for Javier Bardem, and Best Screenplay. It fully solidifies the Coen brothers as legends in my book. It won them more Oscars than any other thing they've worked on. And this was the year that There Will Be Blood was up for Oscars as well, so it beat those ones out. But is it possible that this could still not be your cup of tea? On the upcoming episode of my show, What If I Don't Like It?, I sit down with writer and fellow podcaster and film critic Harry Marks, who you might know as the host of Let's All Go to the Lobby, where he discusses classic films, Hollywood history, and everything in between. Now, Harry hasn't seen this movie, and let's discuss possible reasons why someone might not have seen it. It's violent. Yeah, but it's not just violence for the sake of violence. It's about fate and chaos and the unpredictability of life. Trust me here, all of the violence serves the story. People don't like the ending. Yeah, people don't like the ending of a lot of different movies, and I don't think that's entirely justifiable in this case. This is a movie that's about the unpredictability of life, and life can be unsatisfying, and I get that comment sometimes, but I don't feel like that's justified here. But it's a slow burn. Yeah, and I get that a lot of times people say that and they're trying to really say that, like, this is a boring movie, and I wouldn't say that. I think this is one of those movies that uses this slow burn to build tension so that when it reaches the denouement, it feels satisfying. It feels like something has happened here. It is something that you see more in older films, so I kind of think this is up your alley. Javier Bardem is really creepy in this, and I'm not sure I want to see him like that. Yeah, I mean, Javier Bardem almost didn't want to do this movie because he thought his English wasn't good enough, and he, didn't really like the character or the haircut. But, the character is not supposed to be liked, and there's no confusion here. There's no Joker going on where people are standing this particular character. He is terrifying, and sometimes that can be too much for some people, but I think this is a really great villain in this story. It's a real downer. It's written by Cormac McCarthy. Like, I don't know. Yeah, it's actually not as much of a downer if you consider some of his other works, but yeah, it is not a feel-good movie. I will spoiler you there. Alert, if you're expecting to see something heartwarming, it was not the right choice for you. But those are reasons why you might not want to see the movie. Can I give you some reasons why you should? Some hype-up reasons to get you into watching this movie. I think a key thing to talk about with this film is going to be the performances. Obviously, Javier Bardem won a Best Supporting Actor for this, and he doesn't really like violence, and he almost turned down the role for that reason, and he didn't think his English was good enough. But oh man, he digs deep, and he winds up coming up with something that is so worth your time here. Josh Brolin's performance is also really, really good here, and he almost did not get the role. He wasn't really up for consideration, but he wanted it so bad. He had his buddy, Robert Rodriguez, help him make an audition tape that just, swayed them because he got the part. Plus, you're going to see Tommy Lee Jones basically playing a rancher sheriff. Like, it's the most Tommy Lee is just being Tommy Lee, and it's wonderful. I love it. It's hilarious at times and perfect. I wouldn't have expected to relate to him so much, like a mid to 50-60-year-old white guy, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm here for this. I get it. You can really feel his weariness and the fact that the world is just so chaotic and overwhelming, and it's kind of just worn him down, and yeah, do I relate to that a little bit right now? And Woody Harrelson's performance is superb, and especially so if you consider the fact that the role he is playing is inspired by his own dad. Yeah, his dad was a hitman convicted of killing a judge. When I found that out, that absolutely blew my mind. Adds so much to the performance. Roger Deakins' cinematography. If you're into cinematography, and I know that you are, it's every frame is a painting. It's one of those things where people go like, oh, the landscape is a character in the man. It is. It is a character. It's gorgeous, and you're gonna love it. I loved it. I'm so excited to get to watch it again, to have a reason to watch it again. Plus, there's a really experimental soundtrack kind of happening here. People say that there's no soundtrack here at all, but it's actually way more layered. It really reminds me of the Akira soundtrack and the way that it is integrated into the film. The score was composed by Carter Burwell, and he's known for his frequent collaborations with the Coen brothers, which kind of makes sense. So that's why he developed this distinct and unsettling soundscape, I want to say, which is done in a really interesting way because they actually integrate the sound effects with the music that you hear. So it's really way more seamless. It feels like, is this diegetic? Is this non-diegetic? It doesn't really give you the same sort of emotional cues that you get from a normal soundtrack, where there's obvious things like you hear the violin, so you know a bad guy is going to come out. It relies more on unsettling quality of the sound itself. And so I could understand if people are like, I didn't really care for the Neubraten soundtrack. You are always going to get me with a weird ass soundtrack. That's why I love Ravenous so much. That's why I love Ladyhawke so much. So I will admit that I am a pretty biased person to tell you, but the sound here is very interesting. We'll talk more on air, obviously, but I'm so excited for you to get to watch this movie for the first time, and I know that you're hesitant, so thank you so much for trying out a movie that you might not like.
No Country for Old Men came out in 2007, so it's been a long time, and I still have never seen it. And it's not for lack of interest or anything like that. Quite the opposite. I've been very interested, but I've always felt like I needed to be in the right mindset and the right mood to just sit down and appreciate it and watch it the way it was meant to be enjoyed. And I just have never gotten around to it. I mean, it's the Coen brothers. One of my favorite films of all time is Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I absolutely adore that film. I think it's their best film. Will I still feel that way after watching this? I don't know. We'll see what happens, but I'm excited and, I don't know, nervous because this film has been hyped up for so long and Javier Bardem won the Oscar for it, and I don't know what to expect.
Welcome to our episode. We are here to discuss No Country for Old Men, and we have Harry Marks. I'm so excited to have this conversation. Thank you for joining us today.
I am thankful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, my guests may have seen you on a couple episodes of Movie Night Extravaganza. We were just talking about how we talked about In a Lonely Place and Sweet Smell of Success, both great movies to discuss. Super great conversations. Highly recommend you check them out. And in fact, because this is YouTube and we're talking right now, a link will appear above us so that you could go, but don't leave us yet. That's for later. Let's talk to Harry and get to meet him and know a little bit about him. I know you because we met on TikTok.
Yes. So I meet a lot of people these days is on TikTok.
Yeah, I know, me too. Yeah,
Yes.
it's a great resource.
Oh, it's been fantastic. Yeah, I joined TikTok a couple of years ago. And I think I told this story on, I don't know if it was Movie Night Extravaganza, but I've told it a couple times. I didn't know what I wanted to do with the channel, and I decided at some point I was scrolling through, and Turner Classic Movies has an account, and they came up on my For You page, and I noticed that they were showing clips from old movies, which is great, and they were sort of like adorning them with stickers and sort of memifying them. But they weren't posting my favorite part, which is the introductions. So I decided that's where I would focus my efforts. I was working for a company called Grim and Mild at the time, doing a lot of research and writing, working on scripts for things. And I thought, let me parlay those skills into doing this. So I started filming, introductions to classic films, with the assumption that, you'd watch the intro and then you go watch the movie like you would do on Turner Classic Movies. And then that eventually grew during the writer's strike several years ago. I pivoted to history. So film history, Hollywood history. And then I eventually managed to work out a deal with a streaming company called Momitu, where I'm doing my introductions for Momitu. So if you go on, like if you look at The Hitchhiker or Les Miserables, from 1936, you can see the movie. They'll have a trailer, and then my introduction will be there as well. And you can watch the intro and then go watch the movie, which is just freaking cool.
So cool. So cool. Yeah, I've been on the Momentu channel and seeing your face and being like, oh, yes, this is wonderful. And it is such a lovely way to watch a movie, to have someone just sit you down and put you in a little bit of a context. That's kind of
Yes.
what I try and do with my hype videos. Like, hey, here's a little bit more than just the story you're about to watch. And it really just enlightens the whole experience. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot. I think a lot of films, especially from the 30s and 40s,
Hmm.
where it's not just the context of racism or sexism or any of the other isms that are out there, but also putting it in the context of like the time in which it was made around World War II, what was going on politically across the world, especially right now with what's going on. Just providing that context, not to apologize for it or justify it, but to explain it and to put the viewer in a mindset of here's what people were thinking and doing at this time. So now you understand why things were done that way.
Absolutely, because if you can't get past certain aspects of older films that are gonna make them feel like dated or not aged well, as people say, you're still gonna miss the gem at the center that is really moving cinema, really great cinematography, really great directing, really wonderful performances
Oh
that
yeah.
still come out of that you could still, as a filmmaker or film critic, you have to know about.
I Gone with the Wind is a perfect example for me because a lot of people won't watch it, and I understand why. It is a racist film. It is it apologizes for the South. It's that I can't remember the term,
Mhm.
but that Southern pride, that Confederate pride, that people have, and that revisionist history of who was really at fault for what happened to the South. It was the South's fault. But but when you put it in the
Surprise.
context of the Hayes Code that was
Yes.
enacted several years before that film came out, and you realize that that film is far less racist than it would have been had the Hays Code not been implemented. Margaret Mitchell's original book throws the N word around like nothing, like it is the word the. And
Oof.
because of the Hays Code, certain racial slurs could not be said, and that was one of them. And so we have a much more palatable film because of that.
Wow. Yeah, that's not a film anyone would watch now. There's no way they would be like, "We'll just have a wonderful showing of Gone with the Wind today." Like, no, sir.
Yeah.
Uh, I even think outside of the political stuff, some of the context that you give, like, one of your very popular videos is about the transatlantic accent, which
Oh yeah.
everybody makes fun of, like, "Oh, in old-timey movies, they talk this way." Like, well, there's a reason, and it's quite
Right.
fascinating.
I mean, it's a combination of, people talk that way, sort of to elevate themselves in society.
Mhm.
It's kind of a branch off of a certain, like British dialect, and then also people trained to speak that way.
Yeah.
That it was a classical way of speaking in films and on stage.
Yeah, as someone who has you're from Jersey, right?
I'm from Jersey, yeah.
Yeah, I'm from Queens, so, like, the accent variations, you're like, "We gotta tame it down. I can never go full. You won't no one will take me seriously. There's only so many roles I could ever get given." Like, yeah,
You
everybody
you
there's still
hide it
now, like,
well, but there are certain things you say where I'm like, "Oh, there it is."
certain words I will not say on air. Every dog is a puppy. Oh, don't say dog, say puppy.
Oh yeah, no. Look, I'm drinking a cup of coffee, and that's how
Yeah.
that's how we say it. It's CAWFEE, coffee.
Coffee. Oh, yeah. So this is just some examples of the kind of content you're gonna get if you're following Harry on YouTube, if you're following Harry on TikTok, if you're going on Memento and you're watching him before a movie. This is the kind of context and interesting, fascinating stuff you're gonna get to hear, which is really wonderful.
It is a smorgasbord of just miscellany.
Yeah, yeah, well, I'm kind of that way too because it's nice to do a review on stuff that's coming out, but it's really also fun to go back into the context of stuff and be like, "Yo, did you know that in the very first Oscars they almost gave Best Actor to a dog?"
I
Speaking of
love
dogs.
your Oscar history videos were fantastic.
You find that stuff out, and you're just like, "Holy shit," and there's
Yeah.
wonderful biography written about that dog. That dog did a lot of work, so
It Look, it
kudos
it
to
it beat
Rinton.
drug addiction, it beat yeah, it was a lot.
I've started asking these 3 questions that are kind of like I don't know if you've ever seen Inside the Actor's Studio.
What's your favorite curse word?
Yeah, those ki so they're a little bit more I used to ask people what their top 4 movies were on Letterboxd, but that can feel a little performative, and sometimes people are like, "Oh, I change them all the time," or it puts them on the spot. So I'm asking these 3 movie questions that are kind of inspired by Inside the Actor's Studio to be a little bit more open and get to know you as a film viewer, and The first one is simply, what's the first movie you can remember seeing?
Beauty and the Beast. First movie I saw in theaters, and that's the first one I remember seeing. I probably saw some before then, but the first one I actively remember is Beauty and the Beast.
Do you remember who you saw it with?
My mom took me,
Do you still like that
and
movie?
I love that film. The music in that film is terrific. I miss
It
2D
is.
animation. It was just it was a painting. It was absolutely gorgeous. I
Mm.
love Beauty and the Beast. That Disney Renaissance era from 1989 to 1999 is just perfection.
I think Alan Menken has like the soundtrack of my inner soul, like everything that he works on. I'll always be like, I don't
Menken and
really like
Ray.
musicals, but I do love Little Shop of Horrors and I do love Little Mermaid. I do love all that Disney stuff. People are like, you're
Yep.
just listing Alan Menken stuff over and over again, sweetheart.
Yep, exactly. Alan Menken and Tim Rice wrote
Yeah.
every great
Yeah.
musical in the 90s.
So true. Oh, that's a great choice. Oh, just lucky, I guess your family brought you to that. I got Fox and the Hound was my first one to make sure it was
Oh,
traumatizing.
the film that, what's his face? Don Bluth, that was the last film he worked on at Disney before he started his studio,
Yeah, God.
and you can tell right away, like, that is a Don Bluth film through and through. Tragic, gut-wrenching, yeah.
Yeah, my family was a Don Bluth family. My family's like, maybe not Disney. Let's do more of the let's put on The Last Unicorn every time she has the flu and see how she turns out.
Yep. Yeah, I remember, it was a rainy day, they wouldn't let us out for recess, so they put on Land Before Time, and I was doing my best to hold back my tears when the mother dies. Just like, "This is not what you put on for children, you bastards."
We are the same age because that was a movie that got put on for us when it rained, but then we
I'm turning 40 in a month.
I'm turning 40 and yeah, in a month. You also have an April birthday.
Yeah,
I have
yep,
the 23rd.
I'm the 12th.
We're almost
That's
exactly the
hilarious.
same age. Oh, man. My school lost all their VHSs. I went to a inner city public school, and, we only wound up with the Neverending Story, which is ironic, so that literally every time it rained for, like, 10 years, all we watched was the Neverending
Was
Story.
Artax dying? Yeah.
And it was wherever the fuck we were the last time they stopped it. So, doesn't matter, just keep going on the tape, then
Oh,
rewind and
they just
start over again.
Jeez,
So it can
that's
sometimes take,
amazing.
like, 2 years before the movie ended.
Yep.
Oh, man. What movie do you think you have seen the most times?
That's a good question. Jesus. Maybe Raiders of the Lost Ark, maybe Back to the Future, maybe Jaws. It's one of those 3. Off the top of
Hmm.
my head, I can't tell you, but it's probably Raiders. I've probably seen that the most. That and Back to the Future are neck and neck.
Yeah, is it like a comfort film where, like, if you don't know what to put on, just put on that?
It's either that or, "Oh, it's on, I'll just sit and watch it."
Yeah.
That was a lot of that,
Mhm.
but yeah, it's those 2. It's just that was the era I grew up in, watching Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, Jaws.
Mhm.
Those are the films that really helped me with my love of film.
Absolutely. Great stuff. We've done Indiana Jones episodes as well. I I feel the film I am most watched is the same way. It's Tombstone because it was just always on and I
Oh,
kind of
wow.
like it. So I'll just I'll put on another Tombstone.
Yep.
Okay, yeah. It's a great scene.
Home Alone is another one that I've probably seen, 2 dozen times, like,
Yeah.
just it's a yearly watch, yeah.
Containing future Oscar winner Kieran Culkin in a smaller
That's
beginning
right.
role.
Wetting the bed after drinking a ton of Pepsi.
If you could watch any movie right now, even one that has not yet come out, like this conversation ends and you can just go throw on any movie at all, what movie would it be?
National Treasure. It's my favorite movie of all time. It's my number 1 on Letterboxd. It I was actually, like, very upset, Marta McFly on Instagram and TikTok, she has a podcast, and she had a guy on who, like, swears he's, like, the number 1 National Treasure fan. He's a fucking liar. I am the number 1 National Treasure fan. That film is perfect. That is a 6 out of 5 stars for me. That is just it's my favorite film of all time.
That's fantastic. I gotta admit something. I've never seen that movie.
Oh my god. We now need to do this in reverse, where you go watch it and I ask you about it.
We do actually do that. I have guests who have been on before, and then they come back on and we reverse it because when we're talking, they'll be like, "There's surely something I love that you haven't seen," and it happens every time. Usually it's
Oh my
something
god.
kid-based, but this is yeah, I've heard of it, I'm aware of it, I have no bias against it, I just never bothered to watch it, although it
It
was recently a Jeopardy question.
regular Jeopardy or celebrity Jeopardy?
Pop culture Jeopardy!
Oh,
A
pop culture
third
Jeopardy, okay.
option. That was it
Yeah,
wasn't
I
quite a final question, they wanted you to say what was the famous line that Nicolas Cage says in the movie, and
I'm going to
nobody
steal the
got it.
Declaration of Independence.
Nobody got it, yeah, you're right.
I want that tattooed actually on my arm. I want the initial, it's like IGTS TDOI or whatever. I just want that on my arm. I want people to ask, what does that mean? It means I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence.
That's good, you know what? Consider it done. If you'll come back on with me to talk about that, we will absolutely watch that movie.
Let's do it. I will talk about that
Alright.
movie till the end of time. One of my books that you can buy on Amazon is called The Library at the Center of the Earth, and it was very heavily inspired by National Treasure, my love for that film. So it's about solving clues about American history and finding the secret library. And yeah, I adore that film.
Oh my god. You to tangent and kind of plug this ancillary for people, you might enjoy doing something that happens every year called the Green Mountain Adventure Challenge. It happens in
Ooh.
Vermont, and it's a physical you have to corporeally be there. So it's not like a physical
Okay,
challenge, but
that's
you
one strike against it.
the problem is you start in one location and they give you a physical clue. And usually it's like you have to rearrange the letters, you have to understand how the codex works to break the cipher. And that will send you to another location nearby. And it's all about a historical event that's happened in the area, that's actually happened in the area. And the challenge is sending you to all the physical places that are important to that historical event. And you're trying to break the clues to get to
Oh, cool.
at the end, there's a giant chest that's outside where you started, and you're going to get the code to open up the chest, but you have to do all the challenges that lead you to figuring it out.
That's so cool.
And I've done it multiple years.
Is it just one person at a time, or like do you join teams? Like
Whatever you want. You can have as many people as you want on one team. You can have one. You do it however you. And the thing is, if you don't solve it, you don't solve it. But if you buy it, you can do it for however long it takes you to do it. You just keep starting back again. It's mostly in the summer because it's hard to get to places in the winter in Vermont.
yeah.
But like I went with my sister and husband, and we tried to do it last year and we didn't finish. We can start again in the summer. We don't have to pay to do it again. We can just keep
Oh,
trying to
cool.
finish. We got stuck on the cipher. We can't figure out this fucking cipher that's blown my mind. But we're in like graveyards looking at people's birth dates and trying to crack open little tiny cases that they have locked on different locations. You're like hiking up
Oh my
hills
god,
to
that's so
find
cool.
hidden teapots. You're finding out all about the history of Vermont. It felt like what I assumed National Treasure would be like, but I haven't seen the movie, so I can't really say. But
It's I mean it's about, he's a treasure hunter, and like he's hired to find this lost treasure of the Knights
mhm.
Templar. And so that's
Ah,
what sets this whole thing in motion. But it's oh my god, you got to go
yeah,
watch it. It's so perfect. It's on Disney Plus.
wonderful.
If you have Disney Plus, you can go watch it.
I do. Okay, okay. Well, we'll set that up. I also know that you have a book out. We were talking about that on Movie Night Extravaganza because you went to like a book signing for your book, which was so cool.
I mentioned I wrote for this company Grim and Mild, and they had produced, or they still produce, the podcasts Lore and Cabinet
Mhm.
of Curiosities. And I wrote Cabinet of Curiosities for about 5 years, um, almost 1,000 stories. And St. Martin's Press reached out to my old boss Aaron Mankey and said we want to turn it into a book. And they released this hardcover back in November, and it's got almost, I think about almost 350 stories, 300 stories, somewhere around there, most of which were the ones
Damn.
I had written for the show. So my name is on the book too, which is very nice. Unfortunately, they have me listed as an editor um,
Ah,
in on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It's like, nope, I was a co-author, but that's fine. Um, but yeah, when the book first came out, I was going around to the bookstores signing it. That was very cool. And then yeah, my son had a charity thing for his school at a local Barnes and Noble, so I signed some copies.
That's awesome. That's a great way to be. I love that kind of stuff, little vignette stories. God, some of the most fascinating, even Stephen King's, are his shorter stuff because it's just
Oh
the
yeah.
premise is fascinating more than like so many of these 3-hour movies nowadays. I feel like, oh, you had a really good episode of something, but it's not a great 3-hour movie.
Yeah, there was someone on TikTok who had done a video. I can't remember if he was a screenwriter or a producer, but he basically said, "Don't waste your time on short films." From the context of, if you are trying to make it in the industry, if you're trying to get your script noticed, shorts are not how
Mhm,
you do it. You want to
mhm,
work on a feature that you can sell and build a career on. And I understand that. From a storytelling perspective, if you're just trying to understand the craft, short fiction, whether it's prose or screenplays or something else, is a wonderful way to understand how to craft a story in a limited amount of space. Some of my favorite
mhm,
writing I've ever done is shorts, whether it's flash
mhm,
fiction, which is like a few hundred words, or a short story, which is, a couple pages. Um,
mhm.
but squeezing a narrative from 300 pages down to 3 pages it makes you very aware of what you need and what you don't. And I
Yeah.
love that boundary.
Yeah, it's almost like what TikTok did to my, film criticism. Like, I would use 2 pages of the New York Times to tell you what I think about a film, and then you're on TikTok, you're like, "Nobody's gonna listen past 2 minutes. Get it together.
Let me
Come on."
let me tell you, I did that because I my Nosferatu review is about 7 minutes long with images and all that, and it's at
It's
over
so
a
good.
million views. So, you know,
Oh!
don't don't sell yourself short. Like, if you have something to say, all of my film reviews are somewhere between 5 and 8 minutes, and not all of them have done that, but people appreciate the thought you put into it. If you have, because I'm gonna sort of talk out of school here, but like a lot of the film reviews I see are not great. They're, and it's not that they're the opinions are bad or anything. It's just like there's no thought or effort put into
Mhm.
them. It's like, oh, I liked the movie, or no, I thought it sucked, it was boring, it was slow, the
Yeah.
cinematography was good. Well, what does that mean? No one really goes into explanation, explaining, or into depth about why they felt a certain way about a film, and I didn't want to do that. So
Mhm.
I always, a lot of my videos are scripted out ahead of time. My reviews are usually between 1,500 and 2,000 words, and I cut very little out because, if someone wants to watch it, they'll watch it. If they don't, they'll keep scrolling.
Fair, fair. Absolutely. I do all my stuff is mostly scripted as well. I'll like learn the script and then kind of ad lib off of it, but I do feel like you really should be scripting this stuff. Especially if
Yeah.
you're going for concise, every is like 2 or 3 seconds, so you got to
Yeah.
give it. Come on.
I really hate doing off the cuff videos a lot of the time, because,
Mhm.
like, I'm umming all over the place, and it's so annoying to have to redo a shot 3 or 4 times because I didn't say it exactly the right way that first time. I have a teleprompter in the corner over here that I use when I do my Momitu intros, and I use that a lot too when I do the shelf life, which is my weekly rundown of physical media.
Mhm.
I do all of that through, I'll put on the suit jacket and I'll do it through the teleprompter, so I can just read it
Mhm.
off the screen and not have to fumfer my way through.
Absolutely. And teleprompter reading is a great skill. Not everybody has that. So that's something worth working on as well, I think. Yeah.
It's
A lot of
it
sorry.
took a while because, like, I used to use the teleprompter built into the CapCut app, which is great because you want to
Yeah,
talk to the
yeah.
camera.
Mhm.
And then I had built out of an old binder. I cut a big square hole in an old binder and put some picture frame glass on it, and then I would prop it up with a pencil and slide my iPad underneath, and it would project onto the glass. And I built myself a
Beautiful.
teleprompter. And then when that broke and it had worn out its welcome, I just like sprung for it was like $100 on Amazon for a real teleprompter. I still use my iPad, but it's much more professional looking.
Once you've been doing it for that long, you can kind of feel like you're gonna invest in it. Nobody wants to be the
Right.
guy who, like, gets the full rig week 1 of podcasting with the, like, 4K camera. You're like,
Exactly.
"I don't think you need it yet, honey. It's
It
okay."
was it was very easy to justify that purchase because I knew I was gonna use it, at
Mhm.
least once a week, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that pull and tug with being on any of the social media apps where you're looking at reviews. Although I feel like Letterboxd, you can kind of know whether you're following somebody who's going to give you a real review or somebody who's just going to give you like, I liked it, I hated it.
Yeah.
And I like to hear if some people liked it or didn't hear it, but I would also like the context behind, okay, so the cinematography was good. What about the cinematography was
I
good?
think a lot of people mistake looks pretty for good cinematography, and without understanding that cinematography is more than just how to frame a shot. It's, are you conveying the story the way it was intended? Is it telling the right story?
Mhm.
Is it, it's more than
Mhm.
just, the colors were pretty or the people were framed nicely. There's a lot that goes into cinematography. It's why they have a separate role for cinematographer as opposed to just the director. Because it all matters. And I think a lot of people ignore that.
Oh, yeah, I think a great example of that is the recent episode of Severance, Chikai Bardo, where they
Oh
had
my God.
that director and writer, director and cinematographer were the same on that episode. Forgetting her name, I'll put it in the omissions at the end. Wow, you could feel that that was being touched by someone who was really thinking about what the camera was looking at.
Was that the most recent one, or was that the one from last week?
It's last week because the most recent one is the All Cobell.
Let me tell you, that most recent episode, the All Cobell episode, is one of the most beautiful
It's
45
also
minutes of
very beautiful.
television I have ever seen. And not just in its execute, like in the way it looks. I mean, it was stunning. I love the
Mhm.
blue hues and just the way the whole
Mhm.
thing was put together. It felt cold and isolating and just like it was great. But like just in terms of storytelling, it was so wonderfully executed. And a lot of people, I think, I'm not going to say they're not real fans, but I think they have been tainted by treating television shows as content and not having to think too hard by having the show talk down to them and explain to them, because I'll tell you, I love
Mhm.
the show Reacher. It is the dumbest show on television. I love it for that, but it doesn't pretend to not be that. Like it knows what it is. It's about a big
Absolutely.
oafy, former military guy who beats people up, and it's great. It excels at what it does. But Severance is such a different beast, and it is trying to tell a story in a very deliberate, thoughtful way. And I just think some people don't appreciate that, because there were people saying, "Oh, this episode could have been an email. It could have been a 10-minute flashback. It could have been," but like, it's not just about the big reveal at the end. It is about the setup. It's about seeing that, and spoiler alert for those who haven't watched it yet, but like, we sort of see Lumen's failures in this episode, that it's not just this big monolithic corporation. It moved into a place, sucked it dry, and then kept going. Like it is a like a leech that just drains everything from where it goes. And it was fascinating to learn that lore, that side of it, and seeing the effect on people who aren't all gung-ho about Lumen and part of the cult, and they see what it does to people.
Yes, to see that there was a place that maybe it left behind and that feels negatively about it openly.
Right.
I also think that people misunderstand the concept of, like, not all the content you're given in that episode is relevant to that episode at that point in time. So, like, stuff
Right.
that you're watching now that seems innocuous will make sense later on because they are planting. It's like structure. You can't have the top layer without the bottom layer. So, give it a second. It's not going to feed it to you this moment.
If you go back to the first season, which I kind of want to do now, and just watch Cobell's actions in the first season, this episode explains why she does certain things that we don't really
Mhm.
understand the first time you watch it. There is so much going on here in the long game. People don't appreciate it. I'm not going to
Oh,
say
yeah.
everybody, but a lot of people just didn't appreciate it, and it's disappointing, because we are in the probably the greatest age of television we have ever been in, and we have
Ooh.
showrunners and writers who really care about telling a good story and telling it well. And it seems like all people want is like the next Big Bang Theory, or even the next Breaking Bad. I loved Breaking Bad, but for, in a lot of ways, it was, one, gunfight, or one, what's going to happen next after another. And very little of that show was contemplative and meditative and deliberate. Like, I understand they're different shows and they're different ways of telling a story, but like, appreciate what you have, because otherwise it's just going to be Big Bang Theory all the way down, and I don't think anyone wants that or deserves it.
No, and I think that there should be flavor across the board. So, like, if that's what
Oh
you want
yeah,
to go watch, that's available for you, but that doesn't mean that this can't be available for me. And I'm just
right.
really glad that people are investing in longer run. Like, they can see this is a longer picture show and they're willing to invest in that because a lot of shows like Carnival was a larger picture show that got canceled way too soon because it was wicked expensive to make, but also because people were like, I don't know what's going on. This is weird. This is too
Yeah.
soon for this. And like, I'm glad that we as viewers are willing to say, like, no, we want this. Give us more of this. This is fantastic.
Right. There was a sort of a fight on Book Talk. A lot of readers and writers a couple of months ago. Someone had I would say ill-advisedly made a video basically saying you need to read more literature, more classics, more, the books that we grew up reading in school, that kind of stuff. And I didn't disagree with her premise. People should read better stuff out there. But it sent people into a tizzy, readers and writers
Mhm.
alike, who were like, well, literature is defined as books on a page or words on a page and da da da. It was like, no, you know what she's saying? She's saying, what is it called? Literary fiction is a very distinct category of book. It is books that focus on the prose, on the language that is used, character development. Like, there are certain things that separate literary fiction from genre fiction. Genre fiction is mysteries, thrillers, romance, fantasy. Not that those things can't focus on how nice the language is, but the focus is the plot and moving the story along and hitting certain beats along the thing. And also, like, romance novels have to have a happy ending, or they are not romance novels. They are something else. Um, you know, it's not a bad thing to tell people eat your vegetables. There's a way to do it without sounding like
Yeah.
a gatekeepy jerk,
Yeah.
and sounding like a pompous ass. But I'm sorry, 50 Shades of Grey isn't literature. A Court of Thorn and Roses isn't literature. Sorry, it's genre fiction.
Well, it's literally fanfic that got reprocessed. Like that is hard to ignore whether it's delicious to watch or not. It is also
Yeah,
Twilight. That's the same idea. And people love Twilight. That's fine. I read all of the Hunger Games, even though like the
yeah,
son of the baker's name is Pita, like the bread. Okay, whatever. This is
I
fun.
know.
But like, it's not gonna inspire me to make more art. Whereas something like, say, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which isn't even like, oh, I'm not even telling you to go back and read the Iliad, just like maybe Dr. Zhivago.
One of my favorite books, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, A Little
Mhm.
Life by
Oh,
Hanya
yeah.
Yanagihara is just an absolutely tragic and gut-wrenching read. Made the
Mhm.
mistake of carrying that on the train and, feeling things. Um, and both of those are like 900 pages too, so get the ebook. It's
Yeah.
heavy. But then I'll turn around and I'll read Stephen King, or I will read one of my favorite authors of all time is Lawrence Block. He's a New Yorker. He writes mystery and thriller novels. He writes, he's got one series about a guy. He's an antiquarian bookseller by day, and he is a burglar by night, and he steals. People hire him to steal things back for them. So, like, a divorced guy will hire him to steal back a painting his wife took from him, but inevitably he goes to steal something and someone ends up dead in the place where he's stealing from, and so he has to clear his name. And then he's got other series about Matt Scudder is a detective. They actually did a movie with Liam Neeson, A Walk Among the Tombstones, several years ago.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
good
Yeah.
adaptation. That was Lawrence Block's novel,
I
and that's a much grittier, hardcore, like, crime thriller compared to the burglar series. But those are genre fiction. They're great. They're not high art, high literature. He's a terrific writer, but it's different than what you're going to get from a Mary Shelley or a Hanya Yanagihara or a Murakami or any one of those.
Yeah, and actually, I think this is the perfect segue into our conversation because for
Yeah,
me, at the heart of those two different styles, one of them gives you an ending that you're gonna feel good about because it's a mystery and we
right.
need to know who done killed the guy. And the other one might be like, it's not about solving the mystery, it's about everything that you feel about the person who died.
Yep.
And this film gets very much accused of not being a good film because of the way that it ends.
People want closure. They want either a
Mhm.
happy ending, or they at least want to see justice prevail. They want to see something happen to the bad guy. They want to see some sort of sense of
Mhm.
an ending. And we don't get that here, and I loved it. I absolutely loved the way this, and I'm sorry, I'm sort of skipping ahead to what did you think of the film? I
Yeah.
loved the way they executed this film, and there, I will say it's faithful to the book in a lot of ways. They also deviate from the book in a lot of ways in terms of who lives
Hmm.
and who dies, I think, just to make a better film. But this No Country for Old Men is such a fascinating masterclass in storytelling because there is no like big build up climax at the end. There's no big gunfight at the OK Corral. Nothing like that. It is a slow burn. It is simmering. It is tense as hell the entire time. You're waiting for something big to happen, and you don't really ever get that. You get these dribs and drabs, these little vignettes of action or fear or something to move the plot along, but for the most part it just goes, it just keeps moving and moving. And even at the very end of the film, like the last shot of the film, life goes on, like it just drops to black, and you realize like we're never going to get the closure we ever wanted, and that was never the point.
Exactly, exactly. So let's take a half step back. Why had you not seen this film before?
This was a case of I'll get around to it later and just never
Uh-huh.
being in the mood. It wasn't like I was avoiding it actively. It wasn't like, "Oh, I
Hmm.
heard everyone say this is great. I don't wanna watch this. I'm got my own thing to." It was literally like, "I really should watch this, but I wanna watch something else instead." And this was the push I needed to get off my ass and actually watch the film.
I feel like that is true for me for anything where the author is Cormac McCarthy.
Right,
Cormac,
because
I'm sorry.
you're going in expecting to eat your vegetables and to, to get this like this, I don't want to say plotting, but like just very deliberately filmed movie. And it's not going to
Mhm.
be Captain America. It's not going to be, a Stephen King, Pet Cemetery or whatever. It is going to be a very different kind of film. Even most film noirs, you watch The Maltese Falcon, you watch
Yeah.
Key Largo or Dark Passage, there is a build up to a climactic ending of some kind, and there is some sort of closure. This is also not a film you put on in the background and then fold laundry to. Like, you need to sit and watch this film. It's because I feel like we live in an era of Netflix fodder and just,
Mhm.
quote unquote content, and this
Mhm.
is not content. This is a film. This is to be savored. This is something like if this comes to the theaters near you, like they do a retro, they're gonna throw it on the big screen, go see it on the big screen. It is gorgeous, and it is something
Mhm.
to be, you know, to absorb, not just to have it on in the back.
Absolutely, yeah, Roger Deakins did the cinematography on this. It did get nominated for an Oscar, but didn't win. I believe it lost to There Will Be Blood, but, equally
Mm,
beautiful, which we have also done an
yeah,
episode of this show on, so,
I'm
like,
not
every
mad.
time a painting yeah, I'm not totally mad. They
Yeah.
filmed at the exact same time, and in fact, There Will Be Blood pushed back this movie by 1 day of shooting because they did an explosion the explosion scene that kills the spoiler I won't spoil it. There's an explosion scene in There Will Be Blood, and it caused so much black smoke that it made it impossible to shoot from miles around. And the Coen brothers were like, "Yeah, let's just take the day off. There's nothing we could do. It's fine."
That's funny. It's we've all seen the painting, The Scream by Edvard Munch,
Mhm. Mhm.
that was painted during an era where a lot of paintings coming out of Europe at that time were, um, had that sort of reddish orange amber sky because a volcano had erupted called Mount Pelee that
Yes.
scattered ash and stuff into the sky that had turned it that color for I don't know, years maybe, like at least months, and just changed the hue of the sky around everybody, and so it influenced all these paintings that came out of Europe at the time. So it's funny that that one explosion basically influenced the making of this film in a way.
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting. Again, that's another thing to have context around. You might look at the Scream and just be like, "Oh, what a weird color palette to choose." And then knowing that little bit more makes you able to appreciate the piece of art in a different way.
Yeah.
Uh, Coming into this, having you read the book already, is what you said, yes?
Years and years ago, I remember
Okay.
it's funny, when I read a book, I'll remember how I felt reading it, I will remember certain scenes, but it's not like a movie where I can picture it. Like if I haven't read a book in a while, I'll forget almost everything about it. It's very bizarre. And what's funny is I don't reread things because there's just not enough time. Like I want to keep moving to the next thing. One of my favorite books of all time is Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan. It's sort of a treasure hunt kind of book. It's about this guy
Hmm.
who works in a bookstore and he realizes people come in very, very late at night at odd hours to take out certain books. And he realizes there's a pattern and these people are part of a group and they're tracking down something. And so he joins the hunt. It's a very fun, funny book. But I honestly don't remember most of what went on in it because I read it, 10 years ago and I've done a lot of things since. So
So, did you have any preconceived notions going into this film based on having read it, or just even based on having people tell you about it for so long?
I kn I knew it was going to be heavy. I knew it was
Hmm.
going to be it's hard because Cormac McCarthy is such a he's not a dense writer, but there's a lot packed into his word choice, and there's a lot of, these anecdotes in this story.
Hmm.
And it's like, how do you convey a lot of this, which is very much internalized? How do you convey this well on screen? And I gotta say, the Coens really knocked it out of the park. There were a few especially toward the end, there were a few scenes like where Tommy Lee Jones goes to visit his cousin, and they have that back and forth about do you know how Uncle Max died and all this.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there are a lot of those like almost like end of the episode stories that someone tells to wrap things up in a pretty bow. We never get the pretty bow, but it was just like, man, everyone's got a story to tell. It was a little heavy handed by the end of the film. Um, but yeah, otherwise, I just thought it was very well done.
Yeah, that is the one scene that I'm like, "Nah, maybe I woulda cut that scene." I mean, it's
It's
a long movie, but the editing keeps it paced pretty well, and that's the only time where you're like, "Mm."
Yeah, it got a little too close to did you see Wolfman, the new
Not
one?
yet. Not yet.
Okay. So there's a scene in the movie, I know I'm not spoiling anything here, but where the main character basically explains to his daughter what the point of the film is, like, without saying as much. Without saying the words generational trauma, he explains to her that sometimes people carry stuff from their past that was done to them by people they love, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of those, like, especially that scene where he's talking about, you can't stop what's coming, that's vanity. It's like, just tell people this is what the film is about at this point. And that was one thing where it's like, ugh, all right, I'll forgive it because the rest of it was so good and was so not condescending to the audience. I'll
Mhm.
forgive this one transgression.
Yeah, and it is 2007, so you know that there is a certain
Yeah,
expectation from people budgeting this film that there be something like that. But it is impressive how much of the script, which won Best Adaptation, the
yeah,
Oscars, has that Coen Brothers frankness, rat-a-tat. Like Deputy Wendell and Sheriff Bell, their rapport back and forth is so
mhm.
fucking hilarious in this movie that is so goddamn heavy. There are these like little zing zangers that really
Yeah.
kind of lift the whole thing up and make it
I
bearable.
I love he's sort of like, Enos in Dukes of Hazzard. He's very, almost happy-go-lucky and, he's just excited to be part of the investigation, and you've got Bell who's seen it all, done it all. He's
Mhm.
Murtaugh in Lethal
Yeah.
Weapon. He's
Yes.
he's days away from retirement. And,
Yes.
they what I love so much, and they sort of allude to this, when he's talking about quitting,
Mhm.
and it's that same scene with the cousin where they're telling the stories, and he says, it's just basically it's all moving too fast now. I can't keep up, and I find it fascinating that the entire film is Bell and his deputy trying to keep up with the investigation, and they're not one step behind, they're like 10 steps behind. Like, he makes it to these crime scenes, way after
You're
things have
late.
happened, and he's always late to like, he never solves the crime. He never they understand, like, you get the glimpses of, where he figures out that they've been using the cattle gun to pop the lock out.
Mhm.
Like, he
Mhm.
figures that out. He sort of he's a great detective in that regard, but he never gets the chance to use those skills to stop the bad guy.
And it's kind of that point of like evil is so omnipresent and will get done what it needs to get done, that it's like
Right.
never within the cards that they would get there ahead of time. He even says most of the time when he, do you want to go to the scene of the crime? And he's like, no, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to
Right.
be part of any of this. It's so
Yeah.
against trying to find it out, even to the point where we don't see Josh Brolin die. We arrive with Sheriff Bell
Right.
way
It's
too late.
And that it's so interesting, that choice to not show us, like, the shootout. Like, we
Mhm.
show up to the shootout with the sheriff. We're behind.
Mhm.
And we get there after the fact, and we see the aftermath and everything, and it's like, "Oh my god, that's," that's what happened. It's
Mhm.
really interesting how they chose to tell that story. It's, reading about it, and then, trying to figure out, is this a Western? Is this not a Western? It's interesting because, it's definitely noir. It's definitely like a neo-noir, and I think it hews closer to revisionist Western than classic Western, clearly. Classic Western, you have, there's good and evil. There's the lawman, and there's the outlaws. And again, in that same, God, that one scene has so much packed into it, where he's talking about the cats. The cousin has all these cats running around the house, and he's like, some are feral, some are they come and go, and some are just outlaws. And it's like, that's sort of how we describe this world is, some people are just feral. They're out for, whatever they feel like. That's Anton Chigurh. There are people who are just outlaws, like Llewellyn, who you know they start out one way and they go another given the opportunity. And um as a Western, this hews closer to like the old Clint Eastwood, Sam Peckinpah, 1960s, 1970s spaghetti Westerns, where good and evil wasn't so clear cut. You had a lot of anti-heroes. You had a lot of, people who
Mhm.
straddled the line. We see a lot of that here.
Absolutely. I actually looked it up, and it is called a neo-Western, sometimes
Yeah.
called neo-Western thriller, and it gets put together with the assassination of, Jesse James and High Water and a couple of other films that came out, in the, like, 2007 to 2020, era of,
Yeah.
like, this
But
attempt
see
to look
how,
at Westerns in this, like, not Western way, like,
right, like
anti-hero way,
Hell or
moral
High Water.
ambiguity. Yeah.
Yeah, Hell or High Water, because it's set in modern times. I'd also add Last Stop in Yuma County, which came out a couple years ago. That's
Yeah,
another
yeah.
neo Western kind of thing. But
Mhm.
I feel like Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, or 310 to Yuma, which is a remake. Like, those
Mhm.
are Westerns. Those are
Just
just
straight
flat
Westerns.
out Westerns because they take place in that time period.
Mhm.
And they again hew closer to, revisionist Westerns of the 60s and 70s.
Mm. I think when people hear Western, they think there's good guys, there's bad guys, there's a resolution at the end, and that's how a
Yeah,
Western is. So whenever there are these outlier Westerns where you're like, that's not really what it was about, and it mirrors what everyone loves seeing right now, the Marvel, the comic book, the like anti-hero, the question of is good even good, or
right.
what comes at the cost of good, and yet people are like, I hate Westerns. And I was like, well, go watch another Marvel movie.
But like, there are Marvel movies that pull, like, Western is such a it was the honestly the first genre of film, one of the first genres of film. The Great Train
Mhm.
Robbery, 1903, is a Western film. It built Hollywood. The first film ever made in Hollywood in Old California, by D.W. Griffith, was a Western film. Like, this established the medium in a large way. It established Hollywood, and it permeates everything that goes on. You look at a film like High Noon, the
Mm.
lone man standing up for what's right against a bunch of people who want to do him wrong and do his town wrong. Like, that explains a lot of Marvel movies, to be honest. Captain America,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly,
Ant-Man.
exactly.
Like, you see this a lot. It's, saying I don't like westerns is like saying I don't like movies.
It's funny the way that people decide that this is when basically the premise of the show. They decide that they have a hard stop against something, and then you kinda wheedle your way in there, and you're like, "Did you know that this is actually that, though?" And they're like, "Well, I kinda like that. I mean, really?" You're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
it is."
go watch the True Grit remake. And I gotta say, I'm usually not a fan of remakes. True Grit, the Jeff Bridges one, light years ahead of the what's his face, John Wayne version. Just, first of all, I
Seriously?
hate John Wayne, but it's also a better film. It's a
Mhm.
more And I think that was also the Coens, wasn't it? Wasn't
It is
True Grit?
Coens,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. They got nominated for a couple things on it, but they didn't win it. This is really the only film that they win Oscars for, and then the one for Fargo, and you're like, "Really?" Because everything for me, I love
Weren't
so much of what they do.
didn't get nominated for Oh Brother? I feel like that one got a bunch of nominations,
It
didn't it?
got nominations, but no wins. This is the only
No
one that
wins.
they've won for, so they won 3 for this and 1 for Fargo.
That is still my favorite Coen Brothers film, Oh Brother, Where Art
So
Thou?
good.
I'm a sucker for a period film, and I just the soundtrack on that is the best I've ever heard. It's just
Mhm.
it's a perfect film for me. It is a 5-star film.
There are so many lines from that that I still quote in my day-to-day life too, like, it's yeah. I just really love their scripts are so important and so specific that the lines are worth quoting for the rest of your
Mhm.
life. You can just keep coming back to them. And as an actor, I know that like when you do this work with them, you write like they you can't improv at all. So this is really the product of what they've written.
And it's what I love about, especially with No Country for Old Men, because there is a lot of that. I don't want it's not like rat-a-tat dialogue. It's not like,
Mhm.
watching a scene of The West Wing and people talking down the
Mhm.
hallway. It's not like that, but it is very authentic and
Mhm.
very it's authentic without being too realistic. It's a heightened reality, but
Mhm.
nobody sounds like they shouldn't. Nobody sounds like they're smarter than they should be. Nobody
Mhm.
sounds like they're trying to be something else that they're not. They're very true to their characters the way they speak, and I really appreciated like Llewellyn sounds different from Belle, sounds different from Anton, sounds
Mhm.
different
Mhm.
from from what's his face, the bounty hunter, Woody Harrelson's character. I can't remember his name.
Oh, I forget
Wells?
his name. I can't remember that
It's
character's
like
name.
Carson Wells, something like that.
Mhm.
Um, but like everyone has a different sound, different dialogue choice for
Mhm.
themselves. And I love that you can pick those out. On the page, you would be able to pick those out.
Absolutely. I It's the little bit of nuance in between, and what I really love that the Coen brothers do with their characters is the assimilation. That's how I feel like they get their rat-a-tat, is like one character
Mhm.
will say something, and the next character will grab onto that concept so quickly and push it right back.
Yes.
Like in this one, they talk about like, what is this? It's a hot mess. And then later on that comes back again, or even just the line about like, well, if that's the rule that you've been living by and it got you here, how good of a rule is it? Like the characters just keep eating each other's dialogue and bringing it back again and again.
Yes. God, that's so good. Yeah.
Yeah. The Big Lebowski, I call it being very dude-like. It's like being water. So much time in The Big Lebowski, a character will say something that's new or weird to us as the audience, and the dude is already like, "Okay, cool. That's the way reality is now." And talking back to it, and you're like, "Wow, that's an amazing way to be as a person."
I hate that movie, and I think a lot of the reason I hate that movie is because people in their 20s built their entire personality on it for the
Ugh,
longest time, and I
yeah.
probably should revisit it at some point because I don't remember much of it. I just remember
Mhm.
how much I despised everyone who loved that movie.
I got to see that in such a specific and strange way. Like, I just got to see it randomly by myself with no context at all from anyone else. I just rented it from the VHS store and was like, "This looks interesting." So, like, that's the way to see it. Because 'cause you're right.
Yeah,
I think if I had gotten further into college and met enough of the people who were into that movie, I might have been like, "No, thank you."
I hate Fight Club for a lot of the same reason, and I know it's a weakness on my part,
Yeah.
but, like, there were people who hated the Eagles because Jeff Bridges hated the Eagles in this movie, and it's like, you're gonna hate one of the greatest rock bands of all time? Like, okay, because the movie told you to?
Okay.
Oh, alright, you good. Sheep.
Yeah. I know, and I have that hang up too. Like, so many of my least favorite people in high school were super into Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the Josh Whedon show,
Mhm.
that I was like, "No, I will never watch that." And I did watch one episode called Hush, and I got to admit that was a
Oh, it's
very
the
good
best
episode.
episode.
Oh, that was a good
I love that
episode.
the one episode you watched is the best episode of the series.
My friend got me to watch it by saying, "Look, I know you hate Josh Whedon's dialogue, but what if I told you there was an episode where almost no one talks?" And I was like, "Put it on."
Yep,
So yeah,
exactly.
even in things you hate, you will find something that you really like. And in talking about these performances, I everybody wants to talk about Javier Bardem's performance. It's
And
super amazing.
he's
Yeah.
great, but I honestly, for me, it was, Tommy Lee Jones. Tommy Lee Jones is the understated ace of this film. He absolutely locks this film down for me. Like, Anton Chigurh is one of the greatest villains in film history. Just
Hmm.
terrifying, really, really scary. You know when he's on screen, nothing good is going to happen. But he's also such an inevitability and such like I don't want to say he's one note, but like you know what you're going to get with him. Like you know this is going to end with someone dying in some way. But with Tommy Lee Jones on screen, you're just like what he's not even unpredictable. It's just like what has he seen and how is this going to influence his decision?
Yeah, it's interesting. These are two different actors, where one is basically playing himself and was the first choice and was the
Right.
person who they wrote this thinking about, and the other one they had to beg to do this and was seriously like, "I don't like this role. My English isn't very good, and I don't like violence." And like, yet they still bring it so well. It's hard to do what Tommy Lee is doing, which is basically being yourself, but also not, because he didn't live any of these experiences, but it
Right.
feels like he did.
And he like you see him in this and then you see him in The Fugitive and you realize it's like the guy from The Fugitive basically went out west and retired and like that's what he's doing now is the small town sheriff. He's Tommy Lee Jones in every movie.
I do
Um
love those kind of connective theories where, like, this movie's just this movie continued.
yeah, exactly. But I mean this takes place in 1980 and The Fugitive was clearly like 1992 or whatever. But this it's just that he Tommy Lee Jones plays Tommy Lee Jones in every movie and you love to watch it because it's like you're getting a glimpse into Tommy Lee Jones. It's like watching Sean Connery. Sean Connery is Sean
Yes.
Connery in every movie.
I would
But we
argue
still watch it.
Denzel Washington also, even in the one where he's a gladiator, still kinda just Denzel
Yeah.
Washington, but
Yep.
I still fucking love it, so it
He's
works for
terrific.
you.
And what's funny is like when he played Malcolm X, he is so like the mannerisms are so close together. The way Malcolm X spoke and the way Denzel speaks, there's a lot of similarity there.
Mhm,
And so like you can tell like this is why he was the perfect choice for this role because he just
mhm.
embodied it so well. But then you watch a film like Ray and you watch Jamie Foxx disappear into Ray Charles, and it's just mind blowing.
Yeah, yeah. Those ones tend to get a little bit more of the notice because of the ability to switch back and forth, but I think both is worth noting. Um, Even Woody Harrelson is playing a weird, like, almost himself. He's technically playing a character that is loosely based on his father, and when I found that out, I
Yeah.
think I told you about it in the video, I was kinda like, "Wait, what? Woody Harrelson's
Yep.
dad was a hitman?"
So bizarre. His
So
whole life
bizarre.
seems weird to me. Like he's supposedly cousins with Matthew McConaughey. Um,
That
it's
makes
just
sense.
very yeah. Honestly, it explains a lot, but it's just very strange to me his trajectory.
Mhm.
Um, I love seeing Stephen Root pop up in this.
I love him in
Um,
everything I see him in, he's
He's
fantastic.
so good.
So
He's just
good.
and
So
he's
good.
also an Oh Brother. Like he's one of those stock Coen Brothers character actors. He
Mhm.
shows up in Oh Brother as the guy in the recording booth. When the guys come in
Yeah.
to record Man of Constant Sorrow. I love when he shows up on screen. He's a hoot.
He is another character actor where you're like, it's always kind of him, but he's so good at voices that you really don't know what version of him you're gonna get. Like even
Yep.
Dale, no, not Dale, the
He was
character he
Bill
plays on King of
on
the Hill,
on
Bill,
King of the
yeah,
Hill. Bill Dauterive. Yeah.
Dotrieve with the like southern accent. Just adore him, and I love that the Coen Brothers know to use him. They pick such weird actors. Actually, the actor who played opposite Javier Bardem in the coin toss scene at the gas station. I have
Oh
his
yeah.
name over here. His name is Gene something. He got his start on this film, and I have to put it at the end. And like this actually got him a career as a character actor, launched him out. People love that scene. And it's really interesting the way that they filmed it, because they did not tell this actor that this is going to go down this way. They did tell him that it ends with him living. That's the way the script is. But Javier Bardem did it completely different every single take. And they never knew whether he was going to be really loudly angry or very, very quiet. And that's why you feel this like it's a brand new actor. This is like his first big role. And he's like literally scared to death in that scene.
Yeah. That's that I love that because it reminds me of Sidney Greenstreet, who's in Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon, and he had been a stage actor for years, but he didn't get his film career until he was, like, well into his 50s. Like, his first film role was Maltese Falcon, and that led to many films after that up until his death. But, it's like you're never too old to get your big start, your big break.
Absolutely. I mean, June Squibb was just superb in Thelma. For people who
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know her, like, oh god, that was a
I love
wonderful
Jude Squibb.
movie. Yeah. And Margot Martindale is getting hotter every year since she did that BoJack Horseman
Her
playing
her full
herself.
title is esteemed character actress Margot Martindale, thank you very much.
That's how we refer to her in my house. Absolutely.
Same. We only refer to her as, is that esteemed character actress Margot Martindale?
Superb. Absolutely. I also think that the person who played the wife, Kelly McDonald, who played the young actress in Trainspotting, the like underage girl that actually winds up with
I
uh,
I haven't seen Trainspotting, another one that's been on my list forever. But I
wow.
recognized her from something. I haven't looked it up yet, but I recognized her from another role, and I cannot put my finger on it. But I've seen her or heard her in something else. She pops up a lot, and I can't remember where she was from.
Oh yeah, her
Um,
accent work here is great because she's actually her real voice is the voice of Merida from Brave. Like she's got a Scottish accent.
oh God, is that her?
That's yes, she's the voice actress who did Merida, absolutely, and that's
No
why she's
freaking
in
way!
Trainspotting is her first role. Like she is full. She's from Glasgow.
Wow. Jeez, that's crazy. I had no idea that was her.
Yeah.
Wow.
She nails it in this. Very, very good. All of the ancillary characters, even Garrett Delahunt, who we talked about, played Wendell. You see
He
him
tried
in
out for Llewellyn. He was supposed to be the lead, and they ended up giving it to Brolin.
Brolin begged them. He sent in a recording of that his friend Robert Rodriguez helped him make because he was like, "I'm desperate for this," and I think he's great for the role. And I do love Garrett in the role that he wound up in, but that makes me a little bit sad because I love Garrett Delahunt and I wish he got
Mhm.
more breaks. So I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay,
Well,
yeah.
also, I think Mark Strong was supposed to, because of the scheduling conflict with Bardem
Hmm.
and the shooting of this, they had Mark Strong on standby to play Anton, and then it worked out that he was able to do the film. But it'd be interesting to see what would have happened if Mark Strong had played Anton Chigurh.
Oh, absolutely. I also get the feeling that, like, at every single step, he had to be talked in a little further and they would do something else. Because, like, the haircut wasn't part of the original deal either. They saw it in a book that Tommy Lee had of some guy standing at a brothel in 1979. And they showed it to him, and he said, I am not going to get laid the entire time we are filming this movie. And then the
That's
Coen
great.
brothers went, perfect, we'll do it. And he goes, no, that, don't, ah.
That's fantastic.
So, so
It's
I do feel like
it's
a
a
backup
great
was a good idea. Sorry.
It's a great choice though, because it's kind of that, that Prince Valiant boyish haircut, and it's a young, almost like like the haircut a naive person would have,
Yeah,
or a stand-up person would have, and he is so not that person. He's this angel of death that comes to collect.
absolutely. It reminds me of the Dutch Paint Boy logo,
Yes,
that little kid. Yeah, and I think
yeah, Dutch boy,
he
yeah.
he really does represent kind of total chaos. Like he is a grim reaper, but in as much as death comes for us all, it comes at random points. Like I do love the way that he has the adherence to the chaos of if the coin says you live, even if you're being annoying to me at this gas station and I would prefer it tell me I get to kill you. I guess you get to live.
But I loved that there was no rhyme or reason to how he in himself is chaotic. He kills the guy in the beginning to steal his car, but then he
Mhm,
challenges the gas station owner to a coin toss, and
mhm,
then he lets the kids live at the end after he busts his arm in the car accident. And it's just like he never it's not like
mm,
his thing is he does this coin toss before he kills you. Like it's
mhm.
like Two-Face. It's not like that. It's he has this weird internal code that he follows, but I don't think even he knows what it is. It's just sort of on a whim, whatever he thinks of the situation is what he's going to do. He could have done a coin toss with Woody Harrelson's character. He doesn't do that. He just sort of talks to
Yes,
him for a little bit. He plays with his food a bit, and then he just sort of ices him right there.
I was thinking about that on this particular viewing, like if there was a rhyme or a reason, and it almost felt like he is still going to accomplish his goal. Like he is an inexorably, I can't say that word. He's just going at trying to get Josh Brolin's character without any kind of stop, like a juggernaut. And if something is something that he needs to get that done, he doesn't let the coin toss get into it. But if it's just
Right.
kind of ancillary and he could still get done his goal, then he'll see, like, maybe this is a fun kill. So you're right, like, he has to kill Woody Harrelson's character. He has to kill Josh Brolin. He doesn't technically have to kill the wife, but the coin says so.
Right.
So
But he also kills the people who hired him too. Like he
yeah.
hires the Stephen Root's character tells the two goons, go hire this guy to get the money
Mhm.
back, and then he kills them and then goes to get the money, and it's like he's gonna do whatever he wants. Like he's an uncaged animal.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, they were keeping him from going to get the money back. So, like, don't fuck with my
Yeah.
goal. But yeah, it's totally chaotic. And that kind of randomness is part of the reason why I think a lot of people are like, I don't really like this movie. I want to hold on to this a little bit more. I don't want to know that life and death and evil are chaotic and people who don't deserve it get it as much as people who
This
do
whole
deserve
film
it.
is yeah, it's an ode to nihilism. Like it's about fate and really whatever's going to happen is going to happen. Whatever
Hmm.
road you took to get here, like the coin, like Anton, that's what happens. You take this road, you get to this place, and there's no rhyme or reason. There's no stopping it. And I think people don't want to face the fact that that is life. Like there is, in a way it's predetermined, in a way it's not. It really is up to luck of the coin.
Hmm. And in a way that can be frustrating, and I can understand that, but I also tend to really like nihilistic stories. How about you? I mean, maybe I'm biased.
I mean, not all the time. I do like to see evil lose and good prevail in the end. I think if you
Mhm.
see we live in nihilistic times as it is. Every news
Mm.
article that comes out, it's like I honestly don't even care anymore. I'm just so tired. Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
care, but like I can't care about everything equally all the time. You burn out that way. So it's just it's an interesting movie, especially for the time it came out in 2007, 2008, because we weren't here yet. We were getting here. So, but I also see the draw. Like people get very upset when they can't, like attach themselves to a villain. Like a lot of
Mhm.
people didn't like Nosferatu because they didn't find him sexy, or they found him too sexy, or you're not supposed to find him sexy, and you're not supposed to find him attractive, and all that. And it's like he's the villain, he's the bad guy. People get upset when bad guys do bad things in movies now, and it's like that's the thing. Sometimes bad people do bad things. That's why they're the bad people. Um, I feel like
Literally
I
a
feel like this
monster. Like,
right. Like I feel like
literally a monster.
the CW with like the Flash and Arrow and all that, like really did a disservice to people, thinking you can rehabilitate people into being good or doing good things. And sometimes people are just bad, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, and I think that is particularly difficult for people to hear. They do want the redemption, the ability to latch
Yeah.
on to something. And also, like, there's the constant issue with the main character being a bad guy and then getting people excited about the quality of them that is more of a warning than a, like, do this, which of course the Joker is the perfect example that people always go with, or even American Psycho, I think, is another great example of, like, this is not for emulation, this is for warning.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Hannibal Rising or read the book.
Yes, yes.
But it's yeah, so it's for those who don't know, it's the prequel to Silence of the Lambs and Red Dragon. It's the origin story of Hannibal Lecter. I didn't love it. I thought the movie was to begin with.
Mhm.
But the way they frame the character is they justify why he is the way he is, because he was involved with someone. I think she dies, and then he goes after her killers and develops a taste for blood, literally a taste for blood. Um, but
Hmm.
if you know anything about serial killers, it's usually not how it happens. And they sort of make apologies for the way he is by getting him to kill the people who kill the person he loves. They turn him into the hero, and he's not a hero. He's a serial killer.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's like Dexter seemed more realistic in that regard, where he witnesses his mother's death and then develops these urges later on. Like that feels far more authentic than guy gets revenge and then becomes a serial killer. Very bizarre way to go about things. Like, don't apologize for it. He is a bad person. He kills people and eats their flesh. It's a bad thing.
And it can be a bad thing. It's okay for it to be a
Right.
bad thing.
It
Yes.
is okay. It is okay for bad people to do bad things in movies. That's why they're the bad people. Like Anton Chigurh, I would love to see a prequel of Anton Chigurh and how he got where he is and why he became who he is. I feel like there was a real hitman based in Jersey actually, Kuklinski, in the 70s, who was a family man. He had a wife and kids and all this, but on the side, he was a mob hitman, and they called him the Iceman, and he was relentless. There was a movie about it starring Michael Shannon, greatest living actor of our time,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's fantastic. But the dude was terrifying. Like, there was no reasoning with him. He would kill randomly. If you got in his way, he would disappear you out into the boonies in Jersey. Like, he was a really bad dude, but there was depth to him. There was a lot going on under the surface, and I would love to see what led this character to become how he is.
Yes, absolutely, to give us this fascinating look into the way that every single scene that he walks into a room, you said that there's this intense feeling of, like, something is going to happen, and how do you get to a point where you can occupy a room and feel as ominous as death itself without giving kind of like an apology for why you are that way?
Yeah, and I think that's why a lot of people find this film unsettling, or not unsettling, but unsatisfying. Is
Mm,
that it it sits here the entire time. It is simmering the entire time, and it never boils over. We never get that climax. We never get that shootout. We never get really any kind of big bombastic action scene or denouement or any of that to um to burn off the steam, to let everything out. Like, you're just waiting for it. It's like an EDM song and the bass never drops. It just builds and builds
yes.
and builds, and then it stops, and then that's it. And it can feel very unsatisfying.
Yeah.
And I get that, but at the same time, it was an experience to sit through this film and just be on edge for 2 hours and feel that tension that never quite goes away.
And I think that there are certain horror movies that don't achieve this level of tension or scaredness or worry for yourself
Hmm.
in a genre where that's like the bread and butter, and this is like, well, it's kind of supposed to be part of the story. It really does achieve that, and I think I would say in part due to the editing because it is very long, and if you didn't
Hmm.
edit it just right. And it's kind of hard to say like what's a film with good editing when you're not really into looking for good editing, but I do feel like here you can see the way the pacing is held together, even in the scenes
Yeah.
where we do get a little bit of action, the way the camera is held together and every cut doesn't feel like, well, we needed to turn around to get this angle. It's like, oh no, this cut is on purpose. This view is on purpose.
Right. Exactly. I think that a great example of this is that first motel scene where he
Mhm.
stashes the briefcase in the air duct in the motel room, and then he
Mhm.
gets a separate room adjoining so he can reach it from the other side. And that's when Anton finds him with the transponder.
Mhm.
And you're again, he goes out, he comes back, he checks the curtain to see if it's out of place, and then you're waiting for something to happen. You are waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him and Anton to have the big shootout or whatever, and it never happens. It's cut in such a way where you think he's in one room and he's in another. It's so beautifully executed.
Yeah. And you could have just had a fight sequence and it would not have left us that shaken as the no
Right.
fight sequence, and that's kind
Because
of the, like, neo-noir aspect, like, there should be a fight out in I'm sorry, neo-western, should be a fight out scene in our western, there's not gonna be a fight out
and
scene in
there
our
is
western.
kind of, because he takes out the Mexican gang members. Anton goes in and he takes out the Mexican gang members, and you think it's only going to get worse from here. Like, there's going to be another shootout with him and Llewellyn, but
Mhm,
it never comes. And I love this scene because it sets me up for what I love to do, which is harken back to classic film. This is our first homage to Psycho in a way, because he kills the guy in the shower, and it's just a great, and he does it in such a beautiful nonchalant way where the guy's hiding in the shower and he pulls the curtain closed and sticks the gun in and shoots him, and then walks out and keeps going. But it's that, and then there's that scene toward the end where Woody Harrelson is walking up the stairs of the hotel, and it's that shot from the top of the stairs, and you're looking down, and Anton's right behind him, and it's
mhm.
it's that same scene with the detective in Psycho when he falls down the stairs.
Yes. Oh yeah,
It's
I
that
forgot.
same it's that same angle, and it's like, oh, they're so good. The way they slip these little Easter eggs in.
Beautiful. Damn, I forgot. The first one I got, the second one I did not get. That's a good one. I do love Anton's fastidious nature where he's like, I take my socks off. Like there's a little
Yep,
like ugh about what he has to do.
yep. That scene where he's digging the shotgun beads out of his leg. Oh god, that was the worst part for me, was when he's taking out the tweezers and he's like pulling them out. Ah.
There are some really good practical effects in this film. All the
Yeah,
gunshots are squibs, and that scene as well. Yeah, they had a really good team doing that. Like you
yeah.
could have added that in later on, but there was no point to why not use squibs.
Yeah. I also love what a different time it was, that scene where he hucks the briefcase over the fence by the border, the Mexican border, and then he buys the jacket and he got the beer and he just sort of like drunkenly stumbles. He's nursing the gunshot wound, and the guy just like lets him go because he's just some drunk, on his way into Mexico. He's like, this guy's no threat. It's like, man, not today.
It's got blood on his face for shit. Yeah, I did remember watching that and going like, "Ah, different times."
Yep.
That character does make a lot of decisions that feel really stupid and frustrating, but also like, well, the story has to go somewhere. It's almost the fact that he cares at all that starts this whole fucking thing off. Like, you're gonna bring water to that guy? You think that that's all he needs is water?
Hmm.
Why?
Yeah, it's almost like the last vestige of goodness in him before he
Mhm.
goes on the run. And but then at the same time you see this intuitive, industrious nature of him, where he's like, he stashes the thing in the air vent, and then he goes to the sporting goods store and says, I need tent poles. And it's like, why do you need tent
Mhm.
poles? And then you realize
Mm.
he's trying to fish the line out from the other side of the vent. It's like, oh, this guy knows it's like MacGyver. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
saws off the shotgun. He seems like he's prepared for everything. And then we get that big reveal toward the end where he loses the shootout with the other guys.
Well, I guess that's almost a commentary on life in itself. Like, you can be prepared for everything, but you'll still
Right.
eventually die. Like, there's no preparedness that gets you out of
Yep.
that. Ugh. I also wanted to talk about the soundtrack, or the minimal soundtrack, or the barely there.
Yeah.
People say this film has no soundtrack. It does have a soundtrack. It's just very minimal, and it's mostly like noise based. And
Hmm.
a lot of times it almost feels like where a soundtrack would have told you exactly what to feel in a scene, this soundtrack is a little bit more like,
Right.
I'm not going
And
to
I think
do that.
that adds to the tension, because you can hear, like, if you watch an old horror movie, you watch Frankenstein or The Mummy or The Wolfman, you can hear the sound, the score build and build, and you realize, uh-oh, something's gonna happen. And there's none of that here. You are waiting in silence, you are holding your breath, and the only sound you hear is your own heartbeat, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I wound up looking up the soundtrack and trying to listen to what I could, a little bit of it, and I was like, this is perhaps the first soundtrack I've ever had where I was like, this is just for the I can't listen to this alone. It feels a little weird. Although that
Who
particular who did it?
who did the soundtrack for this?
He works with the Coen brothers all the time too, and I have it written down here. I just forgot his name.
Because I think a lot of it is also just songs on the radio, like when someone gets into a car.
Carter Burwell? He also used he used the refrigerator frequencies to do parts of this soundtrack, like 60 hertz, like to match it to the hum in certain areas.
Oh,
It's only 16 minutes long, the whole soundtrack. So it is very
it's
experimental.
sparse, yeah.
But it's not so experimental that I feel like I've watched films with experimental soundtracks where it was like too much, you couldn't pay attention to what was going on. I would even venture to get to say like some of the Leonard Bernstein stuff I've seen was a bit like On the Waterfront I really like, but there are certain scenes where I'm like, could you pull it back, Leonard? I can't hear what they're saying.
I felt that way about The Social Network with Reznor's
Mhm.
soundtrack. It was very like in your face, loud when it didn't need to be.
Just mix the dialogue up a little bit, please.
Yeah.
Was there any scene in this that you really liked or really didn't like? I mean, we kind of talked about the last scene being a little bit too much, or the second to last
It's
scene.
It's funny because there's so much packed into that scene. I loved it, and I didn't like it so much. It's so weird. Like there were
Mhm.
parts of it I really liked, just the interaction with Tommy Lee Jones and his cousin, and then there are other parts of it, mostly in the exposition, and not even exposition. It was just like here's the theme of the film. There you go. I didn't love that. Uh,
Yeah.
but other than that, um, I loved the scene right before that where Tommy Lee Jones goes back to the scene of the crime where Llewellyn was found dead, and Anton is on the other side of the wall clutching the gun, waiting to see what happens, and you're also waiting to see what
Yes.
happens, and, most of it's cast in shadow, you can't really see what's going on, and you're, again, waiting for that thing to happen, that other shoe to drop, and it never quite does, and it's just that was so intense. That was good. I love the scene between Anton and Woody Harrelson right before he takes them out. Just the way they're talking, and you're like, is he going to get out of this? Is he not? Oh, guess he's not. When the phone goes off and everyone's just sort of like jumps a little. It's just there's so many good scenes in this film, but like it's really when two characters play off each other. That's when I really think
Mhm.
it hits its mark.
Absolutely. I think part of what really works for me, having like you, we've watched so many films to find a film where you're like, I genuinely don't know what's going to happen in this scene is
Hmm.
so refreshing. Like I almost chase that high as much as I can because so many movies, even just the score, the sound, the cinematography, the way that this shot is set, you know that the person's going to close the medicine cabinet and Freddy Krueger is going to be behind them. So like it is a little thrilling to have a movie that kind of is random.
Yeah. This is a film I would love to have on my shelf from a script perspective. Like I would
Mhm,
love to,
mhm.
to buy the screenplay of it. This Sweet Smell of Success, very very dependent on the language used, on the way people talk to each other in this film. It's a heightened reality, but it's not too heightened. It's just very there. I really appreciate there's not a ton of exposition in this film that is expressed through dialogue. There is a sort of the audience needs to go in with a kind of an understanding of how people interact with each other and how things just happen. And I like that.
Yeah, and that's particularly hard to get from actors, especially these actors all did a phenomenal job. Most of them are not using their natural accent and they can't deviate from the words as they are written. So it's quite a
Right.
performance to get any of that to feel natural.
Yeah. This is not a film you ad lib. this is
No.
this is a film you read what's written and you put your own spin on it, and like Tommy Lee Jones does. But this is one you
Mhm.
have to really recite.
It's
This is
it's
like
definitely
Shakespeare.
part of the acting comes in the accent and the accent work that you do before you even show up on set,
Yeah,
which can be really, really hard. I don't know, do you watch White Lotus?
I do not.
Oh, because the current White Lotus has a Durham accent in it, which is Southern, but not typically Southern. And so a lot
Hmm.
of people are losing their minds saying this is a terrible Southern accent, whereas everyone from Durham is like, that's what we sound like.
Is that the Parker Posey role? Is that the yeah, I because
Yeah.
I had seen a clip online of her doing the accent. I was like, "What is that?"
They're like, oh no, it's like a real
Yeah.
it's Lindsey Graham. If you know Senator Lindsey Graham, they're like, oh my
Yes.
God, Meemaw. That Southern accent.
Or, oh, what's his face? Oh, he just died a year or 2 ago. He was on Will& and Grace.
Oh, yes, the shorter actor, he's phenomenally hilarious.
Yeah,
Leslie something?
Leslie Jordan. No, was it Leslie Jordan?
Yeah, because it's Leslie Jones is the, Saturday Night Live big, tall black
Yes.
actress, and I
I saw
always
her
get the 2
live.
of them confused.
I saw her
Oh,
do
yeah?
a stand-up set live. She was phenomenal. She was great.
She
But yeah, Leslie
seems
Jordan,
phenomenal.
he's got that kind of that twang to him.
That, like, Southern weirdness, it's almost like a Tennessee play. It's really
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah, it's like a Tennessee Williams kinda cat on a hot tin roof thing, yeah.
Yeah, and so it feels contrived, but, like, if you've ever met people who are real humans who sound like this, I'm sorry.
Yeah, oh yeah, like she's gonna serve you a cup of sweet tea and bless your heart and all that, yeah.
Yeah, like, how many syllables are there in the word "no" when you say it?
Mhm.
Oh, I also feel that way for my Australian friends. I love them to death, but when they go and say the word no, I'm just like,
Nor,
no. Like, are you cheating
nor.
at Scrabble on me here? Uh, so I think I really don't have any additional questions to ask you. Is there anything you want to talk about before we get to the very end here?
I don't think so. I think we covered it all. I'm just glad I got to watch it so many times. Like this is the kick I need.
Did you watch it alone with anybody else during the day?
Mostly alone. I would watch it on my Apple TV with my headphones in, so if,
Uh-huh.
someone was in the room doing something, they couldn't hear what was going on. But it was mostly alone.
Good. I do like to watch a movie and experience, but sometimes when I'm watching something, like really watching something, I need to watch it alone so that it doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't get messed up. Although I did watch this again with my husband because this is a film he absolutely adores. So it was fun to get to do that and have him be like, "Oh, this is also my favorite scene." I'm like, "Sweetheart, you can't say that every time it cuts to a new scene."
I will say if for anyone watching it, watch it on a big screen, but if you can watch it
Mhm.
with headphones, do it with headphones. Like I put on noise canceling mode and I was just completely ensconced in, Texas 1980. The Foley work is really good. It's
Mhm.
brooding, it is atmospheric. It's really, really well done.
Absolutely. For a film that has been nominated for the editing on the film and the editing on the sound, again, there
Yeah.
are there are very few examples where I think you can watch a film and say, like, this is an example where you can see that the editing for sound has made a difference, where it's not like, and that's what made the film bad. There's a lot of like,
Right.
here's bad sound, this is good sound. So, usually when the sound editing is done well, you don't notice it. And that's the goal. But here it actually
Yep.
helps a lot. Yeah, and I do
Yeah.
think that wearing headphones would fully immerse you in that kind of setting. Don't watch it on a cracked iPhone screen.
No, this is not an iPhone
Uh,
movie. This
famously,
is one
there's
to be enjoyed on the TV.
uh,
This is yeah.
yeah, there's an episode of Movie Night Extravaganza where we asked the guests to come on for 2001: A Space Odyssey, and they watched it on a cracked iTunes tiny screen. They were like, "That's the
Why?
only thing I had. That was the only thing they had." Oh, we're like, "No, that was not at all how you're supposed to do it."
That's not oh my god. I mean, of all the movies you could have watched on an iPhone, you chose that? Jeez.
And the screen was cracked. Like, I don't know. Go to a library. Sometimes they have viewing rooms.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Ah.
Oof, that is
So
rough.
before we go, I ask these same questions. We're gonna go off with the first one, which is always a little bit like by the time we get to it, we definitely know. Did you like this film?
Loved it. I
Yeah.
loved it. Again, not my favorite Coen Brothers film. That is still a
Mhm,
Brother Where Art Thou.
mhm.
But this is for me. I rated it on Letterboxd 4.5. Like it was
Oh,
just so good. My
that's good.
I took a half a point off just for some of the way they through the dialogue they just basically told you here's what the movie's about. I didn't love just handing it to them on a silver platter, but other than that, it was terrific.
That's a high praise. I think a 4.5 is great.
Yeah.
Fives are kind of hard to get sometimes, but this is definitely a movie that should float in that particular range. And that leads into the second question, which is, would you recommend this to people? And or is there any caveat as to maybe when you wouldn't recommend it to people?
I mean I would absolutely recommend it. I would say if you are expecting, you know, Breaking Bad, if you were expecting, something that's gonna, have twists and turns and action sequences, and if you're expecting an episode of Reacher, basically, it's not that movie. This is a movie you need to sit and watch and really absorb. So go in knowing that you can't you know, chop onions while you're, watching this film or fold your laundry or, clean the house. This is a movie you experience. You don't just throw it on in the background.
I think that's a really great way to say it. Absolutely how I feel about watching it, where no matter what you do, you're gonna wind up having to sit down and stop and watching this film. You can't be, even just knitting is gonna be kinda hard for this film because 'cause you're gonna wanna be fully, submerged in it. So, if you're
So
sitting
much of it is
down.
visual. Just so much of
Oh
it
my
is
god.
unspoken. Like you need to pay attention.
Yeah, if you're looking at a second screen, you're just gonna miss a lot of what makes people like this movie, and you might end up ending this movie thinking like, "Oh, that was a little long, and I don't know why people liked it." And so,
Mhm.
like, if you're not ready to sit down and watch a movie and be fully involved in that, or if you're having like focus issues, or maybe you're like, I can't pay attention to anything right now," maybe just throw on something you've already seen and come back to this another time.
Right. Like, there were times I had to pause it because I realized I had missed something, but I checked my phone because like, "I know that person from somewhere. Where do I know them from?" And I would look it up on IMDb. I do it with every movie I watch. It's not an indictment of the nature of the film or if I liked it or not. It is literally my brain saying, "You cannot do anything until you figure this out."
Me too. I'm exactly the same way, which is why I love when Amazon Video has that thing where you can
With the
pause it.
X-ray, yeah.
And it doesn't do it with every movie, but the movies it does. I also have a husband who's super into that too, so we'll be watching a movie and a scene will start and I'll hear her like and I'm like, "Just tell me the trivia." In this scene, because he's already got the whole IMDb trivia and he's been waiting for even if we haven't seen the movie yet, he's like, "I'm waiting for this scene."
Oh, yeah. No, I do it too. I do it with every film.
And of course, like, you have to do it with Lord of the Rings when they kick the helmet because that's the scene.
That's the scene where he breaks his foot, yeah.
Did you know? I saw a fantastic TikTok where somebody was holding their child who was born like 2 days ago, and they're watching Lord of the Rings, and they're like, "Hey, did you know?" Because that's the only person left alive who probably doesn't. You
I
gotta get 'em
there
young.
I didn't see that, but I saw this woman. She's laying on, I think, on the floor or on the bed, and her baby is right next to her, and the baby is like, I don't know, 3, 4 months old, and the baby is just sort of like looking around, rolling on her back, and the woman is telling her the story of like why she and her sister don't talk anymore, talking to her like she's spilling the tea, gossiping, and it's so funny, to watch this baby react to this person talking to her as if they're like eating brunch and exchanging gossip and stuff. But like you talk to your kids like that, and they develop great vocabularies early in life. They talk early, they
Oh
talk
my
sooner if you
god.
don't talk to them with baby talk. We did that with my son, and he still talks like all the time. So
Oh, that's fantastic. Absolutely, yeah, you just they learn from hearing you. Actually, I've heard that that's also true of cats, that if you have cats that are
yeah,
super talkative, it's probably they don't talk to each other, so they only talk to humans, so that's part of the reason why.
our orange one yells at me all the time. I call him Yadward G. Robinson because he goes meh meh all the time.
Yeah, see? Yeah.
Meh, see?
Oh, um, oh, I always forget the very, very last question is, did you regret having done this?
No, not at all. I want to do it
Perfect.
again.
So, yeah, so sometimes I think there's only 2 episodes where we watched the movie where at the end we were like, "Regret, this was terrible." It was Ice
Oh,
Pirates. Ice Pirates was very
oh
bad.
God. Okay, yeah.
So,
No, I picked a good
basically
movie. It's funny. There's another creator. She goes by Emma of the Impact. And she's got a podcast. I'm going on her show, and it's a similar premise of a movie you haven't watched yet. And I think it's one she hasn't watched either. So we watch it and then talk about it together. So I'm doing Kind Hearts and Coronets, which is an old. Oh, you know it?
I love that movie. Oh my god, I wrote like several pages about it when I was studying British cinema. I just adore that movie. I don't know
I've
anybody
never
else who's
seen it.
seen it.
I've never seen it. I
Exactly.
was reading the plot and I was like, "Why does this sound so familiar?" It sounds like a show I had seen on Broadway. And apparently, A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder was inspired by Kind Hearts and Coronets. And it's one of my favorite experiences on Broadway was seeing that show. And it's very much it's a similar thing of like one guy plays like 7 roles because they're all related family members, and it's the same kind of thing here.
Yeah, it's well, even Eddie Murphy did that in that ridiculous movie where it was like The Clumps or something like that.
Oh yeah,
He
that's right.
plays
Yeah.
everybody, yeah, but it's
He
Alec
plays all the
Guinness. It's like
Yep.
esteemed actor Alec Guinness having a romp. I adored it. I
Yep.
thought it was great, and it's the movie for which the line "Revenge is a dish best served
The
cold"
Surf Cold,
comes
yeah.
from. Yeah. Oh, you're gonna have a great time. Huh.
I can't wait.
Hopefully you don't regret that either. And no, there are some films where I will do this with someone where they'll ask for a movie and I haven't seen it yet, and I'm like, "Well, I'll see it and then we'll watch it." Like Jingle All the Way was a crazy one
Love.
where I was like,
Love Jingle All the Way.
I don't know about this one, guys." And then by the end I was like, "It's a great choice."
It's yearly watch. It is my choice for Christmas. My son and I watch it every. It's so. It's dumb as hell, and it's one of those movies that doesn't take itself seriously. I just love how silly it is, and I love seeing
Absolutely.
Arnold do slapstick. He's just so fun in that movie.
Yeah, so the gamut to which these movies can swing either way, like No Country for Old Men has won so many awards, it's hard to be like, I don't know if somebody's gonna like it. But then we're like, what about the Goofy movie? You're like, I don't know if we're gonna like the Goofy movie, but some
Yeah.
people really do.
And like
Oh.
I watch a ton of classic films. I watch a ton of just good films all the time, and it's like I am not so above it that I can't enjoy Jingle All the Way or Reacher or like any of these silly dumb shows and movies that people dig. I just if a good movie's a good movie. I don't care if it's high art or not.
Mhm, and that's honestly, people who are listening, that's why I love Harry's channel so much. When you subscribe to him on TikTok, on YouTube, you're going to get this kind of education with deep thought that goes way into all the research that you have the context, but it's going to come to you in a way that doesn't seem belittling, doesn't feel like you're ever getting talked down to, and doesn't only celebrate the like vegetables of what you would have to do to be taking film cinema. It's infectiously joyous, but it's not at all
Oh,
pretentious, and that it's really hard to do.
I need to work harder on being pretentious.
It's just keep talking about like, well, I guess you just wouldn't understand, and then don't even explain. That's my
Oh
favorite kind
yeah,
of pretension.
that's how I'll do it. Every episode, every video will end that way. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the show and watching a movie that, by our very definition of the show, you weren't sure you were going to like and you had been putting off. And it really has been a wonderful conversation.
I loved it. Thank you.
Yes, and viewers, hopefully, we'll come back and we will talk shortly about National Treasure and have a little bit of a less
Oh my
heavy
God, this is gonna
movie
be
to
a
go
4-hour
to.
episode.
Welcome to the back end part of the show that I call corrections and omissions. This is a part where we cover stuff that maybe we didn't get totally right, maybe we got totally wrong, or maybe I researched a little bit more on and found some curious and fascinating stuff that I have to share with you because that's part of my OCD is I find these facts, I love them, and I gotta share them with you. There isn't too much for this episode. We did a fantastic job. Pat on the back here. I mean, Harry's just so good at knowing all this stuff that there isn't much to fact check on him. And we dove into all of these conversations. It was hard to not keep talking. And I'm sure when we talk about National Treasure, it will be a long episode. But right at the top, I want to get the words that I said wrong or couldn't say. I kept calling the app that Harry works for Momentu, like a moment. It's Mometu. He said it right. He works for him. But I said it wrong multiple times. It's Mometu, as you can see in the logo. The word I was trying to say but went with juggernaut instead was inexorably. I couldn't get it out. That was the word if you were curious. And then I listen to every episode because I edit them in full, and I am also aware of how many times I love to say absolutely. And I assure you that I'm working on it. The first correction and omission I have for you is that I couldn't remember the last name of the actor from the coin toss scene at the gas station. It was Gene Jones. I did have Gene correct, but I couldn't remember that his last name was Jones. This kind of launched his career. You've seen him in a bunch of different stuff. Most recently, he played Senator Hop in the film Fly Me to the Moon. We talked about short films and how a lot of times people are urging people who want to get into filmmaking to make a full script and to do only a full feature film. Those are the ones that are more likely to get funding. Those are the ones that are more likely to get seen. They're more likely to get you more work. I do want to say this because I didn't in this show that short films are a really great way to do a small section of your feature script as a like, hey, this is what it's going to look like. This is the teaser. This is the taste. This is the amuse-bouche, if you will. And a wonderful example of this is 98 Honda, which is a short film by my friend Christian Banda, who I met at the East Hampton Film Festival. It's really so amazing. The link's going to pop up now. I so encourage you to go watch this. It's out on YouTube now. It's the short that is helping them seek funding for the feature film. I've talked about this on my channel as well. I gave it a review. I need this to be a feature film. It is so interesting. They stop right at a point that's a cliffhanger. So, I do encourage people who have these ideas, cut your teeth on making a short film that is kind of like a teaser or an example of your feature length. Another way to go at it, in my opinion. I'd asked Harry while we were talking about this film how faithful it felt to the book because he had read the book. And it was a long time ago that he'd read the book, and he gave us a little bit of an answer, but I wanted to go into a deeper dive. I mean, the script did win Best Adaptation, and so that does kind of speak to the idea that this kind of was a very good adaptation. Like, it was remarkably faithful to the Cormac McCarthy novel, which is impressive because it doesn't feel as heavy as a lot of the other stuff that it did. And there's so much dialogue and scene structure that is lifted directly from the book that the Coens even joked that while they were writing this script, one of them was reading aloud the novel to the other one. So it does actually stay pretty true to the book in the research that I've done. McCarthy's stripped down atmospheric storytelling is preserved in some places almost verbatim, with the Coens kind of embracing his stark dialogue and relentless tension. Now, despite the faithfulness, some minor adjustments were made to streamline the narrative, and like any kind of film, things kind of had to be cut out or streamlined, like I said. And these are the key differences that I found while researching. They removed a couple of characters and they switched some backstories. There's a teen runaway who appears in the book, and that was cut along with some of Sheriff Bell's backstory. Also, in the novel, Carla Jean, when she meets her fate, she's a little bit kind of like quiet defiance. Whereas in the film, Kelly MacDonald plays it as like more visibly shaken, and that's really just a nuanced difference. Also, the book is more explicit about Carla Jean's fate after she meets Anton, while the film kind of leaves it ambiguous, although you do see him take off his socks, which always means what you think it means. Surprisingly, McCarthy had very little involvement in the adaptation. He's even said that the Coens, quote, didn't need any help from me to make a movie, which is pretty understated when you think about the Coens. His signature prose and philosophical yet blunt, let's put it that way of telling a story leans more heavily on monologues and internal structures, whereas I feel like the film kind of pares this down in favor of more visual storytelling. The book is supposed to linger more on the existential crisis of Sheriff Bell, and the film focuses more on the action and suspense. And we kind of talked about that in our discussion with Harry. So the long and the short, and a little bit long here, is that there's a lot of reasons why this is considered such a great adaptation, and I think it really hits in the place where it tells the story very true to the original story, but every choice to make it different is cinematic. It helps to the medium that it is done in, instead of just being like, oh, we needed to make it shorter because it's a movie. Like it does everything purposefully, and that's why whenever you see a Coen Brother movie, everything is so purposeful. All the shots are purposeful, the editing, the music, the lines have to be exactly as written. It is truly a wonderful experience to see something put together by people who've so thoughtfully done so. We had talked about the episodes of Severance that had recently come out with regards to their cinematography, but we didn't say who the cinematographer was. It's Jessica Lee Gagne, and I really want to put some credit on that name because I think we might be talking about the first woman ever to win the Best Cinematography Oscar in the future. This woman is amazing. Now, we talked about Sweet Vitriol, and although that is not directed by her, Ben Stiller directed that, she did do the cinematography. She does a lot of the cinematography on Severance. Her directorial debut was Chikai Bardo, and that blows my freaking mind, and is part of the reason why I think that we will be hearing her name a lot more, even though I didn't say it in the episode, and it pisses me off so much. She's also worked with Denis Villeneuve on The Enemy. She's worked with Nathan Fielder. Like, check out their credits. Watch other things that they've done, because I'm so incredibly impressed by this person, and I just wanted to make sure I took time to tell you who they were and why you should know them too. And that's it. That's the whole episode. We're going to keep it short, hardly short. It's just about 2 hours. I'm going to cut out right now, though. I want to encourage you to go check out Harry's stuff. If you like this episode, please subscribe here. Find me on TikTok, the same name, Instagram, the same name. I do shorts, I do trivia, all kinds of stuff, and I would love it if you helped create this community with me and subscribed to what we've got going. We've got a lot more good stuff coming up. We had a wonderful episode that you should check out with the letter hack. was amazing. We talked about Cabin in the Woods, and we've got Marty McFly coming up soon, as well as a friend of mine who is a graphic designer. You might know his work from, he did the poster on Girl in the Basement. It's Aaron Wood. So much good stuff coming out to you soon. But until then, I hope you have a good rest of your day.